With week 10 of the college football season now in the books, initially going in, there didn't appear to be any major matchups on tab that would have shaken up the top 25. Boy, was I ever wrong.
You fucking idiot.
It seemed as though there were some matchups for the teams in the top 25 that either proved to be more than they could handle or a slight case of looking ahead, i.e. trap game. Want to find out which teams fell into those traps? Stay tuned to find out on Gridiron Gab Triple Option. Welcome back, Gabbers. Thank you all so much for joining us yet again. I am once again the one and only Mr. CeeLo, joining you here as the college football season has now seen its largest shakeup of the 2024-25 season. And I didn't see it coming. I think Brad and myself saw a couple of games coming that could have possibly went this way. We both called a couple of these upsets, but I would have never guessed that it would have been this magnitude and these many teams that would have faltered. But we do know there's a lot of games where teams get the notion to look ahead, and it's a notorious thing, and unfortunately there were some teams that were looking to make history this weekend, and unfortunately now that will not be the case. But let us go through and do the roundup, shall we? The first team on this fallout was number 24 Illinois falling to unranked Minnesota's 25-17. Now, the minute I watched this game, I think many of you saw that the previous show, I did think that this was going to be an interesting ball game. And what really changed the pace of this game for me was, as I said on my show, I felt like if Minnesota can run the football and establish it well, they would have a great opportunity to establish this. But Max Brosmer was a huge part in Minnesota being able to stave off the Illinois Illini. Whereas they were able to run the football with Darius Taylor for 131 yards. He had 22 carries. Whereas the Illinois offense had over 350 yards of total offense, which was a shocker considering that the Golden Gophers had 361. And guys, you know how my formula of the off the upsets goes. Minnesota actually won both of these. So here we are. 361, they outgained the Illinois Illini by 9 yards. They had no turnovers. Illinois had 2. And they had the time of possession. They were up 9 minutes. Time of possession. So it's one of those cases where the Mr. CeeLo formula works. But getting back to the numbers and the way the game was played, I really felt like Minnesota was controlling the pace with some really great play calls by the coaching staff. And as I said, they did not go away from what they do, which is running the football. And needless to say, there were a lot of timely interceptions in this game, as it was Minnesota was up 13-10 at the half. And it seemed like that when they came out in the second half, this was going to be a game where Illinois was going to take care of itself. And it didn't work that way. Illinois' offense kept getting stymied, and they were unable to control the pace. Minnesota continued to control the pace, getting big-time first downs and continuously going about their business, as well as being able to keep the Illinois' offense in check. So with that said, Illinois falls to 6-3 and probably done in the top 25, whereas Minnesota could possibly get a look. Number 21 Army, 21 Air Force 3. Now, this was a game that I was looking forward to watching, but I did not get to because I think I was trying to find it online, but I could not. But I did watch some of the highlights of this game. Just looking at the way this game went, the Black Knights kept everything equal, so to speak. The Air Force Academy kept it close. It was 6-3 at halftime. And later on in the second half, Army was able to not only pull away, but they were able to really gain control of the game. If you look at the tail of the tape, as I always say, the Air Force Falcons turned it over 3 times. That's a big no-no. They did win the time of possession. They did not, however, win the total yards. So when you look at the tail of the tape and you look at how this goes, the way it needs to be, this did not favor Air Force. Air Force had turnovers and they were unable to win the time of possession. But then you look over at the way this game played out. You had Dwayne Coleman finishing with 42 yards on the ground. He was 5 of 8 for 48 yards passing. But Kanye Udo had 22 carries, 158 yards, and 2 scores. Not too shabby on the other side for the Air Force Falcons. Quentin Hayes had 61 yards, but that on the ground. But unfortunately, when you get outgained on the ground and you have 3 bad turnovers against this Army team, it's almost impossible to make that up. As the Army Black Knights are able to pull out the win and go to 8-0 for the first time since 1996, which was the fall in which I was a senior in high school, of course. I really hated to do this next game, but it's the lower ranking game. It was one of the best showings of the year. As my man Brad would say, pony up. Yeah, this was a game where SMU just came out and they just basically, in a nutshell, showed themselves as we're the better team. Now, this game was out of hand well before. The score is not indicative of what it looked like. SMU 48, Pitt 25. Upset of to me, one of the upsets of the week. Not the upset, but one of the upsets. But, people will say, well, they were 2 rankings down. That just goes to show you how bad the rankings are. And then they turn around and they blast SMU up over Notre Dame, which is a bunch of, but I'm not going to go there. Ha, Brad. Well, if you look at the tail of the tape, everything points into an absolute dominating performance. I know what people will say, well, look at the total yards. Yeah, but they were just yards. 2 turnovers for the Pitt Panthers. The SMU outgained them by 14 yards, but Pitt had the ball for 31 minutes. And I know a lot of people are going to look at this as a whole and they're going to make assumptions. But watching this game, it was so much fun. And for the longest time in that first half, it looked so much like that this SMU team was just in total command of this game. Guys, it was 31-3 at the half. This 48-25 scored. They made a pretty good push. I didn't really watch past the third quarter. I think when I turned over to the Clemson-Louisville game. And like I said, I looked at this game. I was watching how the SMU Mustangs were just absolutely just getting what they want when they wanted on this Pitt Panther defense. And if they weren't getting what they want, Pitt was turning the ball over. And that was something that I had not seen with these guys. Keith Jennings was absolutely brilliant. 17 of 25, 306 yards, 2 touchdowns. Brashard Smith, 23 carries, 161 yards, 2 scores. That's what I mean when SMU got what they wanted. And this was so much fun. It was a track meet watching these guys go at it. Now, Pitt tried to make it a game, but after they got down 34-11, I turned it. Now, they did put 14 points on in the fourth quarter, but this was a total mismatch. And I said in the show before these games, I said Pitt was going to have to score points. I felt like this was going to be a game that they were going to have to score points, but I also said Pitt can't turn the ball over against SMU because SMU will carve you up. Now, I get it. Only 2 turnovers, but that's all you needed with SMU. Jennings and Smith are going to be guys that should be, if they can keep winning, one of those guys is going to get in the Heisman voting. This team is something else. Side note, Matthew Hibner, wide receiver, as well as Keyshawn Smith, wide receivers for SMU. Hibner had an 80-yarder for a touchdown. Smith had a 43-yard long. This is what I'm going to tell you. Jennings is going to be an exciting guy. I want you guys to keep this guy in your mind. Kevin Jenkins. This guy is going to be one heck of a quarterback soon. And he's just learning. He's really starting to grow because he's nothing but a sophomore. This guy reminds me a lot of Michael Vick. With a little bit of Cam Ward. But Pitt falls for the first time. SMU goes to 8-1, and they have a dramatic shift in the rankings this week, as you guys will see later on. Not to my dismay, but yeah, I think it shouldn't be after one win and you miss out on them. You just shoot them up there all of a sudden. Number 19, Ole Miss, 63, Arkansas, 31. Now, I did say there may be an upset in this game, but looking at what Arkansas looked like they lost this game after it was like the second or third drive, and it was after Ole Miss got up 14-3, it was almost like, nah, we're done. But then let's look at the tail, as we always do. Arkansas lost all three categories in this one. All of them. And the big one was the yardage, of course. Ole Miss had over 200 yards more of offense. And then they had 2 turnovers. Ole Miss even controlled the clock. That's not something you see. They outrushed Arkansas 132 to 127 in Fayetteville.
Run.
Arkansas, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. I'm still not going to put no respect on Lane Kiffin yet. He can get that this week. And you guys know what I'm talking about. Jackson Dart, 25 of 31, 515 yards, 6 touchdowns. You still ain't winning the Heisman. Jackson Dart also had 47 yards on the ground. And Jordan Watkins had 8 catches for 254 yards, 5 touchdowns. You still ain't on the Heisman watch list. Caden Lee, 5 catches, 127. Daquan Wright, 9 catches, 99 yards. Just going down that and saying no Heisman because these guys can't do that against competition that matters. That's all I'm saying. Arkansas they look like they just didn't have a pulse. They did score 21 points in the second half, but after that, it was already 35 to 10 at the half, and then Ole Miss just made matters worse when they put up 21 to Arkansas's 14 and just really made those the second half irrelevant. But they did close it out in retrospect. So, gab out to them. Guys, where are my manners? Oh my goodness, I done went into the show and I have not given out Brad's gab outs. Oh my goodness, I am so embarrassed right now, you guys. I am in the middle of this show and I am going to have to stop and give you all of what my buddy Brad said. He hit me up, y'all. He hit me up and said, "Where are you at, man? Where are you at, dude? Where's the show at?" And I had another problem with my iPad, you guys. It was crashing on me again. Okay, Brad says Texas A&M 38-21. Illinois 24-7. Louisville called that one right. Ohio State, we both called that. Ole Miss. Army, yes. Tennessee. Dogs, not even close. K-State, ooh. Hoosiers, ooh. SMU, 38-35. Oregon 38-37. And then, no, I can't say that. Gold and blue through and through, baby. They keep trying to keep us out because they know we are a threat. Gold and blue through and through. But thank you, Brad, as always, buddy. I appreciate you always commenting. You're my buddy. And guys, make sure you comment and you can become a close friend of the show, as well as a full-blown family member of the Gab. A full-blown Gab family member. Next, we got number 17, K-State, falling to unranked Houston 24-19. Now, I remember trying to flip back and forth from this game. I don't remember what game I was watching, but I kind of lost interest at halftime because it was 16-10 at the half. And Houston, I think, I really stopped focusing on this game. I didn't know really the outcome of this game until late in the evening. When you look at it the first half, you're thinking, okay, K-State's going to run this thing down into the, they're going to run them out of the building. And I didn't pay any attention to it. And like I said, when I saw the ending score, I wanted to know what happened. Well, you look at the tail of the tape. Kansas State had 21. It was 21-10 in first downs. Yardage gained almost 100 more. But K-State had 2 turnovers. And time of possession goes in K-State's way. But Houston only won the turnover battle. Now, how this game really, in my opinion, took this turn was the fourth quarter. Really, it was just a whole, what I call a slew of things that took place in the fourth quarter. K-State was unable to make plays down the stretch. And they did have a costly interception after the Houston touchdown. And I mean that was huge. You come in, you got a whole bunch of momentum coming in after the first half. And I mean, you're talking about you get a field goal, both of you get turnover on downs, and then you force Houston into another punt, and then you get an interception, which turns into a huge touchdown deep in your own territory for Houston. And then once again, Houston scores another touchdown, and you try to come back and make a run at them to try to win the game late in the fourth quarter, and you throw another interception. So really it was a case of 2 big plays being made that cost them this. It was 19-10, but then again, like I said, when you get that turnover on downs in the third quarter, when you had a 3rd and 1 and there was a huge loss on 3rd and 1, and then you go for it on 4th down not deep, but over in Houston territory, and you don't convert, I think that may have been a huge change of momentum, but also you stop Houston on 4 straight plays on 4th down, and like I said, you're unable to capitalize. And as a team that is favored, you have to capitalize when the opposing team makes mistakes, and that was a huge mistake that Kansas State made by not capitalizing. When you don't capitalize, you generally don't win. But you look at the numbers, K-State played well enough to win, but those turnovers, you almost have to gain 100 yards more than the opposing team to overcome those turnovers. As we see, K-State, Avery Johnson had 238 yards passing, but he had 2 interceptions. Zion Chris that's Houston's QB, was 11 for 11 for 103 and a touchdown. Zion Chris also rushed for 75 yards. He is going to be a pretty good quarterback if he can learn how to throw it down the field. Now, he's just a sophomore. Not as polished as many of the other quarterbacks. And honestly, if somebody takes some time with him, he can be a dangerous, dynamic quarterback. But Houston goes to 4-5 as they continue their growing pains. DJ Giddens only had 50 yards on the ground. But I would imagine this would be adios for K-State in the top 25. But there goes again one of the major upsets in the college football landscape on week 9, week 10, which I did not see coming. Number 15, Boise State 56, San Diego State 24. As Ashton Jonty continues his march towards being the first Boise player to win a Heisman Trophy, as he has 31 carries for 149 yards and 2 scores, while adding 2 grabs for 31 yards. As Maddox Madison threw 24 of 32, 307 yards, 4 touchdowns. Meanwhile, the San Diego State Aztecs were overwhelmed by the Broncos early in this game. It was 35-10 before you could look up. And basically from there, it showed the dominance of Boise State as they continued to pour it on, despite San Diego State's best efforts. They just were outmatched up front, and that's a lot of teams. You see a lot of what Boise State does is they get a lot of really good players that don't go to the top tier schools, and from there, it's just a matter of mismatches amongst the schools that it plays. But they're still a really good football team. It would be interesting to see them in the college football playoff. I think it would be. But Boise State goes to 7-1 as Ashton Jante continues to Bronco his way towards the Heisman Trophy. Number 13, Indiana, 47, and unranked Michigan State just absolutely obliterates Michigan State, 47-10, as Indiana goes to 9-0 for the first time in program history. So one of the few teams that actually held up its end of the bargain this week. So, you know, as I said, Indiana came out, and this looked like a game that Michigan State was going to pull the upset. So I kind of bookmarked this game because I was like, okay. It was flipping back and forth, and I have like 3 iPads, you guys, and I was watching each of these games on my apps. So I'm going to end up, you guys keep supporting me, I'm going to be able to watch all these games. So it's really tough. You got one here, and then you got 2 big screens that you're watching. So it's kind of like, okay, prioritize this one, prioritize that one, kind of get. And you also had them, it was almost like you had them synced. I had one game at commercial, I had this game running a play, I had this game in a huddle, and I had this game under center or in the shotgun. But watching this game, one thing I will say about Indiana is a team that they do a great job mixing up what they're doing. Now, it doesn't reflect that in the rushing yards. They did have 122 yards, which Michigan State is really good at stopping the run. But one thing I will say is Indiana never gave up on the run. Even though Rourke threw 29 times for 263 and 4 touchdowns, Justice Ellison and Miles Price you had 32 yards by Ellison. Price had 25 yards. And the rest is really just self-explanatory. Indiana just went out here and they basically said to Michigan State, we don't care if we're playing in East Lansing. We're going to go out here and we are going to dominate you. And dominate they did for 3 quarters. Indiana got behind 10-0 to the Spartans, and Sparty just didn't have any answers afterwards. You look at the first downs, Indiana won that one. Total yards, they doubled up Michigan State. And you can't pull the upset that way. You went on and only won the time of possession battle, but you lost the turnover battle. You turned it over twice. And then on top of that, you didn't have 200 yards of total offense. That can't happen if not only are you going to turn it over, but you're going to not have any yardage. And you're going to get one of these results. Indiana 47, Michigan State 10. Indiana is 9-0 for the first time in school history. Watch out for Indiana. That's all I'm going to say. Guys, this team, in my opinion, they are for real. Don't sleep on them. Another upset that really caught me off guard. The Texas Tech Red Raiders 23, the Iowa State Cyclones 22. Now, as always, we got to go and look at the tail of the tape. Texas Tech did not win the first down battle. They lost by 2. They did not win the total yards. Iowa State had 432 to 366. And the turnover battle was even. The time of possession, 34-17 to 25. They had the ball almost 10 minutes more, yet Texas Tech was still able to pull out the victory. But what happened is you saw 2 turnovers that were very, very costly for the Texas Tech Red Raiders. And see, what generally happens when you have those type of turnovers, because you look at Iowa State, they were able to come back. And after Texas Tech went up 10-3, they were able to score 10 points in the second quarter. And it looked like they were on the way to bringing this thing down. But they had a huge interception in your own territory. Now, even though Texas Tech ended up kicking the football, Texas Tech's interceptions came all in the first half. And here's where I think the game changed. When Iowa State scored their touchdown, and after Texas Tech, Iowa State scored the touchdown and went up 13-10 at the half, they were set up to run this game out of the building. But then after an 11-play, 61-yard drive that found itself inside the Texas Tech 15, to me, that was where the course of their fortune changed. Because if Iowa State not only scores before half and then they go in the beginning of the second half, that really takes all the sail out of Texas Tech's ride. Because the reality of it is the Cyclones were at home. They're riding this wave of momentum. And they get this score. But they didn't. Texas Tech got the ball back, kicked it, played field position. Iowa State played field position and actually kicked this thing all the way down to the 2-yard line. Then they proceeded to have a 12-play drive, which was capped off, which was highlighted by a personal foul on a 3rd and 10 that gave the Texas Tech Red Raiders a first down. How many times do we say you generally, when you see penalties on game, you generally see penalties on game scoring, on the scoring drives? It's generally on third down and longs or second and forevers that get teams out of a jam that they probably normally would not be able to play themselves out of. And what was great about what it was is when after they scored, the Cyclones were able to come back and get a field goal, despite the fact that Iowa Cyclones got all the way to the 3-yard line and chose not to kick it. They chose to go for it, which it's admirable, but the question I have to ask is, and my whole concept is, yeah, you're home, but in the words of A-Train, a friend of the show, you kick the points. You kick the points. And the very next drive, Texas Tech turns it over on downs. And then Iowa State misses a field goal. So that's 6 points right there, you guys. Then Texas Tech scores the fateful touchdown. That puts them up pretty much for good. So see, if you kick these 2 field goals, this is a tie. That's a tie. You score the touchdown and then you have to get an onside kick. See, you don't even have to get an onside kick after you score your touchdown. You don't have to do all that. You could just, as it says, you went for 2. You went for 2 to try to win the game. You wouldn't have had to win the game. All you had to do is kick the extra point. You win the game. Chasing points. So Iowa State's Cinderella undefeated season is over to the hands of the 6-3 Texas Tech Red Raiders. Could we see them enter the top 25 for the first time? Maybe. And the upset special. Now, a lot of people are not going to call this an upset special, but Mr. CeeLo called this one too.
Shut up! Shut the fuck up! Damn it!
Louisville's 33, number 11, Clemson 21. Now, looking at this game from afar, I was watching this game and I saw it looked like that Clemson was in control early. But this is why I don't like analysts. They sat here and they talked up Cade Klubnik. And then he met a team in the Louisville Cardinal that... Now, I'm going to say this. The Clemson Tigers, this game was actually 33-14. This was a smackdown of epic proportions. And, you know, when you have a team like the Louisville Cardinals that they get at least, Coach Brom and this team usually get one major upset a year. And I said on my show, this is it. Because they really don't have any more upset opportunities on the schedule. This is it. And I was not surprised watching this game. Look at this. Phil Moffitt had 171 yards and 2 scores. That's great if you got him on your college fantasy team. But Isaac Brown, 151, 1 score. And the huge difference was you had a block kick in this game. And looking at the total team stats, what I always look at, you guys, for Mr. CeeLo's formula of the upset. Am I going to add Louisville to this list? Clemson, 31 first downs. Louisville, 19. Clemson, 450 yards of offense to 366 for Louisville. It's looking like that. Turnovers, even. Time of possession, 37 minutes and 52 seconds to only 22 minutes. But here's the tail of the tape in this case, you guys. I want you to think real hard. Because Louisville came out and they had a very good first drive, but they missed the field goal. And they weren't able to convert touchdowns until later on. And they came back in it was halftime. It was 17-7 at the half. Really, Clemson had some really good drives in the first half. They had a 10-play, 30-yard that ate up almost 5 minutes. 5 minutes, 10 plays, you get nothing but a punt. And then here you go, a missed field goal, 10 plays, 50 yards, 359. They really got to address the kicking game. Dabo, you're going to have to address the kicking game. And the big thing is when they got the football back with less than 2 minutes left, and Tyler Shook drove these guys down the field 47 yards for a touchdown. I said to myself, oh boy, because Dabo and them haven't had to play from behind since the Georgia game. But then we come out, Louisville gets the football and tack on a field goal. That made it 20-7. So in essence, they were able to steal 2 possessions. They stole 10 points and made it 20-7. So in just that, within that 5-minute period, they put 10 points on the board. And then the first drive, Clemson goes 3 and out. And then this fast-paced Louisville offense runs 8 plays and gets 37 yards down the field in 3 minutes, 25 seconds. And they kick another field goal, inching their way past the Clemson Tigers. You were waiting on Death Valley to wake these guys up. I was waiting for something to come about and jumpstart these guys. But I knew when it got about halfway, the fans were getting antsy. And after they kicked their field goal, Dabo and his guys, they went for it deep inside their own territory on 4th and 1 at the 34, and they turned Phil Maffa backwards. To me, that was it. That was the ball game. Now, everybody's going to say, well, why? They didn't score a touchdown. Well, I mean, here's the reality. You gave up 3 points. Now, granted, you stopped Louisville, and they didn't give it 1 yard. Great. But the reality of it is the momentum had been shifted. They snatched your heart. They kicked the field goal. It's now 26-7. You're down 19 points. And you have not shown any life. And Kate Klubnik has not come to life. I mean, look, Klubnik was 33 of 56, 228 in a score. And Maffa had 171. My problem is that the Clemson Tigers were running too darn slow. A team like this, you got to speed them up. If you watch Louisville play Notre Dame or play SMU, they kept them running. Dabo, you can't play this same old school ball. There are some teams you got to speed them up. What do you do with a great defense? You move them quick. What did Louisville do? They stayed in tempo. That's how they countered you. They stayed in tempo. I was impressed. Ultimately, Louisville was able to finish this thing out with another touchdown after it looked like after Clemson ran that 16-play, 61-yard, 5-minute drive. They did pick up the pace in the late third quarter, but by then it was just too late. Because by then Louisville had came out and they did what they do. The very first play after Clemson ran the onside kick, they turned right back around and they took it in 45 yards by Isaac Brown. But I think Dabo needs to understand, you run fast until you get in a situation where you need to slow down. But Clemson falls, and more than likely it's going to knock them out of the playoff. Now, this upset right here just didn't make no sense. Now, Brad and everybody else, didn't I say that Marcel Reed did not need to be the starter? Case in point, this is why he shouldn't have been the starter. South Carolina went into this game doing what? Game planning for Marcel Reed. The kid is a great bullpenner. Excellent bullpenner. But you had your opportunity. You used your ace in the hole. This was the time to go back to Connor Wigman. And the other thing, why did you guys not run a lot of the deep throws that I was seeing in that game against LSU? It's also fair to know that they lost one of their top backs, Le'Veon Moss, in this game too. So it's also fair to say this. Lenore Sellers for South Carolina was pretty good. He was 244, 2 touchdowns. Raheem Sanders this was the thing that killed me, is they did the exact same thing to A&M that they did to LSU. Sellers was marvelous. They had no answer for him. He had 244 yards on the ground, 2 touchdowns. He also had 106 yards on the ground. Now, meanwhile, Raheem Sanders had 144 yards on the ground, 2 scores. They had a total of 286 yards on the ground, them being South Carolina. The only thing that aggravates me is they could have done this a lot earlier. They could have beaten some of the best teams in the Southeastern Conference, and we'd be talking a different conversation right now. But then A&M showed their defense was not very good. And gab out to the fans of South Carolina, getting them pumped. Joshua Simone had 4 grabs for 132 yards, 2 scores. Raheem Sanders also added 92 yards in receiving yards. So he was a huge part of this team. A&M just really had no answers for this. And Marcel Reed was not horrible, but they were not going to let him beat them. His longest run was 20. Amari Daniels came in and had a 56-yarder. He had 13 carries on the night, 83 yards and a score. But all in all, A&M's defense was sloppy. The Columbia crowd, to me, sucked the wind out of this game. I honestly look at it and think A&M felt like, and I remember watching bits and pieces of this game, it was tied up at the half. And it looked like South Carolina just turned it up a notch. I was looking at A&M to turn it up a notch. But then, as I said, this wasn't a game I was expecting to be an upset. I think I said in the show I wouldn't be surprised, but it wasn't a game I was anticipating anything crazy happening. But as you saw, it did. But I don't see South Carolina coming into the top 25. But every hope that the Texas A&M Aggies had at joining the playoff are probably dashed by now, because it's crowded at the top of that Southeastern Conference playoff board as the Aggies fall to the South Carolina Gamecocks. But let's look at the upset formula here. South Carolina had 26 first downs. South Carolina, you ain't gonna believe this, you guys, outgained Texas A&M by 180 yards on the dot. And A&M had 2 turnovers to South Carolina's 1. A&M won the time of possession by 1 minute. A minute and a half. So there you go. The formula never lies. It hardly ever lies. That's a generality, Brad. And this game looked like it was going to be scary for the Volunteers. I looked up. Oh, I'm sorry. Tennessee, number 7 Tennessee 28, Kentucky 18. Now, this is a team that should have fallen. If you play and you struggle with a team in your building, you should fall. Not a team who didn't play. You right. Exposing the Southeastern Conference bias, as I always do. But looking here, Kentucky got up 10-0. And once again, you got Kentucky, and I don't know what the talk is about Brock Vandegrift. All you Georgia fans talk about him like he's better than banana pudding cupcakes. Yeah! No. He was 10 of 17, 123. Meanwhile, Nico Iamaleava was 28 of 38 for 292 and a touchdown. But Dylan Sampson, yet again, is the quiet workhorse of this team. 27 carries, 142 yards, 2 touchdowns. Now, meanwhile, while Iamaleava gets all of the press, Sampson is the guy that makes this engine go. But Kentucky's got to get a quarterback. I don't care what you got to do because this is pathetic. It is straight up pathetic at the quarterback position. I get it. Your offensive line is suspect. But for you to run for 17 yards and 102 yards, your line's pretty good at running the football. They need a quarterback and they need a OC that can be creative with his play calling. I look at this game and I say to myself, why were the Kentucky Wildcats able to do what they do? Well, Kentucky was able to control the pace of the game for the most part because going in the half it was 10-7. And that third quarter was a huge momentum shift. But looking at the numbers, Tennessee had 10 more first downs. They also had 117 more yards total. Kentucky had 3 turnovers. Vandy Griff had 2 interceptions. 3-1. You cannot turn the football over against this Tennessee football team. You just can't. And unfortunately for them, they have not mastered the art of having a quarterback that is okay with just, I would prefer having an interception that is down the field like a punt, if you will. Probably one drive that the Kentucky Wildcats are going to look at themselves and kick themselves at is that 4th and 2 call at the Tennessee 5. So I didn't understand that play call. You've been able to move the football. Why would you put the ball in the hands of Vandy Griff? I wouldn't. That's just me. I mean, people will say he made a couple of good throws, but not to me. He wasn't making enough quality throws to me. That's just where I'm at with that. There were a lot of opportunities in this game. Tennessee turned the football over deep in Kentucky territory. They didn't take advantage of it. They had opportunity after opportunity. They turned it over deep in Kentucky territory. This game could have been a lot uglier in the first half, but Tennessee couldn't get out of its own way. Finally, Kentucky was able to look at it and say, okay, we're up 7-7. And they got inside the Tennessee 20 again. And on 3rd and 3, they tried to have Vandy Griff run, which was another suspect play, I would say. There's got to be another guy on there that's more nimble-footed than Vandy Griff. I'm sorry. That's just the way I see it. They fumbled the football on the opening drive. Their opening drive of the third quarter. Vandy Griff actually fumbled it on a strip sack. And they had a golden opportunity, which they capitalized on. So, you got to limit those turnovers when you're a team that is on the road and an underdog. But Tennessee goes to 7-1 after their 28-18 victory. Yeah. Let's see how well the polls punish them for that. In a game that I just watched and I sat there and thought to myself, this ain't fair. Now, the score is not indicative of what this game really was. Cam Ward was absolutely just fabulous. Watching this guy scooting around in that pocket and just navigating the way he did. I watched the entire game, and for the Duke to be up 21-17, it was like Miami said, okay, hey, look, let's let them be ahead, but let's put them away in the second half. And I was amazed. I could not believe what I saw in the second half. Well, I could, but I couldn't. As they proceeded to score 36 points in the second half and just run away with this thing. They scored 36 points and had only gave up 10 to Duke. And what was so amazing was I watched a beautiful touchdown throw that was just, oh my goodness, it was just absolutely amazing. The way Restrepo was able to get open. It was absolutely fun to watch this guy. And I'm going to be honest with you, Duke's got some players. You watch Duke's Jordan Moore make that one-handed grab and then Chandler Rivers made a huge leaping interception, which was a very good throw, but it took a really great play to make it. And then Xavier Restrepo ended up becoming the Miami Hurricanes all-time reception leader and all-time receiving yards leader on I think it was a 66-yard touchdown. He did it all in that one play. And like I said, I told you, I love this guy. And this Cam McCormick, that ninth-year senior guy, I love this kid too. I think he plays with a lot of heart. I enjoy watching his energy. But Xavier Restrepo is the best guy on the field. Now, Malik Murphy had some really... I will say this. It looked like the Duke Blue Devils, after Malik Murphy came back, after they got in a 14-0 hole. No, it was 14-7. Was it 14-7, 14-0? When they got in that hole and they made that run, I was like, uh-oh. Because I think they scored the next 3 of the next 4 possessions. And the Hurricanes got stifled. And it looked like that the Duke Blue Devils had turned a corner. And they were going to win this game. But enter Cam Ward, whom was 25 of 41, 400 yards, 5 touchdowns, and that incredible one-handed interception. But his counterpart, Malik Murphy, as I say, he was 25 of 41, 325, but he had 3 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. He had a really good go ball later on after he threw that really bad go ball that I guess he didn't see the safety, and the safety for Miami comes over and he snatches that, and that sets up Miami's first score. But once again, Peyton Jones having a busy day. He had 71 yards. But I thought that was another thing that I did not think. Duke didn't stick with the running game enough. And I'm looking at Malik Murphy, the way he moves and manipulates the pocket. Maybe they need to get him on the perimeter more. Maybe he doesn't have the athleticism. I would think you need to move him, son, because the way he manipulates the pocket, he gives off the impression that he's really good moving in the pocket. But I didn't see a lot of that. But once again, Xavier Restrepo, 8 catches, 146 yards, 3 touchdowns, becomes the Miami Hurricanes, 3 touchdowns, becomes the Miami Hurricanes all-time leader in receptions and yards. And yeah, this was a game where it just looked like Miami was just playing around. Like they were basically saying, "Oh, you guys really think that you're going to come in here and just do what you do." But what killed them was that formula for the upset. They had 4 turnovers to Miami's 2. Miami won the time of possession and total yards. Not good. Not good. But Miami is 9-0 for the first time since 2017 when they went 10-0. And they will be trying to do that again in the following week as they face off against a foe that has all the intentions of trying to scare them and has the ability to as well. The matchup of the week that everybody was looking forward to, and I've said this too many times about Penn State. You know, Franklin said that the expectations are high, and that's what you have to do. Well, here's the problem, Franklin. You got to go into the transfer portal. Because apparently the guys you're recruiting at quarterback are not cutting it. Ohio State 20, Penn State 13, as Ohio State picks up the minor upset. I have no fear that Penn State, I don't think Ohio State has any fear that Penn State can beat them. Even with a whiteout in Happy Valley. I think they said 107 people were in this game, but they didn't give them anything to cheer about. Now, there was some fireworks early in this game. It looked like Penn State's defense showed up, and it looked like their offense showed up for one drive. Outside of that, I mean, you think about it, they scored 13 points. Penn State only scored 10 points. They scored 10 points in the first quarter. They ain't scored another single solitary touchdown. Now, here's the thing. This is what you got to ask yourself. If you are the Penn State Nittany Lions, you got to ask yourself a serious question. How in the world can you call yourself a powerhouse player in all this, and the only touchdown you get is a pick six? And it was a great play. No doubt about it. This was a beautiful play because he straight baited Will Howard. He took off up the field, and if you guys watched it, he came back off and jumped off in front and cut off the route. Cut off the guy he was covering and jumped in front of another player and took it the distance. I can't say anything about Ryan Day right now because Ryan Day, he got Franklin's number. They can't beat nobody. I mean, they can't beat anybody that's a powerhouse. They can't beat Michigan, nor can they beat Ohio State. This would have been the perfect year instead of having Ohio State on the schedule and having Michigan. Well, let me stop. Until they beat the big dog, we can't say that. Will Howard was 16 of 24, 182, 2 touchdowns and a pick. Drew Aller, 12 of 20, 146. In the running game, non-existent for Penn State. They even tried to get semi-creative. Not creative enough. Keyshawn Junkins, 14 carries, 95 yards. Travion Henderson, 10 for 54. Even Will Howard got an act, 24 yards on the ground. Jeremiah Smith, 4 catches, 55 yards. Brandon Enis, 33. Emeka Abuka had a great touchdown catch. But then here's the reality. You turn the ball over twice. And I'm talking about Ohio State. And then Aller turns it over. Ohio State's turnover turned into points. And you still weren't able to capitalize. All you needed was one touchdown. Can your offense get one? Penn State's not a contender to me. They're not. They're to me on the outside looking in. How everybody feels about Notre Dame, they're on the outside looking in because they haven't proven they can beat anybody of the top tier. That's just how I feel. Ohio State's going to bounce back into the probably top 3. Meanwhile, Penn State, in my opinion, you a home team and you lose pretty convincingly. Defensively, you're pretty good. Offensively, you ain't elite. Can't score no points. Well, Brad, I got to tell you, buddy. The number 2 dogs look suspect. I ain't going to do that. Now, we all know Georgia's looking ahead. We all know. We understand that this is a game that Georgia's trying to accomplish whatever they can accomplish and get it done. Georgia 34, Florida 20. Now, this game was in doubt up until halftime because Georgia was down 13-6 to Florida. But let's look at the old reliable tail of the tape. Now, they doubled Florida in first downs. Doubled them in yards pretty much. But the catch-22 is this. 3 turnovers. All Carson Beck interceptions. And see, this is where the Florida Gators and any team, they got to look at this and say, we can't turn the ball over. Now, granted, there were some great plays, but you cannot turn the football over. Not against this team and think you're going to win. Beck was 25 of 40, 309 yards, 2 scores, 3 interceptions. This is what I don't understand about the Bulldogs. They don't run the football. Are you just so hell-bent on trying to get Carson Beck to the National Football League that you're willing to lose a game with him? Well, I get it. You're going to have to throw the ball down the field, but there's a better way to do it. You better be glad Aiden Warner wasn't halfway decent. 22, 66. And then you had Jacoby Jackson, 12 carries, 74 yards. I don't know why they didn't stick with the running game. Jaden Ball, 17 carries, 64 yards. I don't get it. But DJ Lagaway, I think he left this game, if I'm not mistaken. But Georgia escapes with a big matchup coming up this week, 34-20 over the Florida Gators in the world's largest cocktail party. And finally, the Oregon Ducks put on a clinic and put a straight beat down on the Michigan Wolverines. Now, I did say you could see a surprise here, but then I said less likely. This game was 28-10 before we even knew it. And after that, Oregon was just trying to get out of here. Get out of the big house with a win. But looking at the tail of the tape of the upset, not much to look at. Oregon did turn it over once, but they won total yardage, and time of possession. So when you have that, there's not a good sign there. Not a good sign there. And I think Oregon is going to continue to run through its opponents. I don't see anybody else worthy on the schedule, at least until they go for the Big Ten championship. But as I said, we're looking at Dylan Gabriel attempting to make his Heisman run, as he had. It was 22 of 34, 294 and a touchdown. Also, he ran for one. Jordan James had 117 yards on the ground. Still, quarterback is an issue at Michigan. You just got to get this solved if you're the Wolverines. You have to get the quarterback position under wrap. And Oregon, like I said, they're dominating on the offensive front. The defense is playing at a pretty good, substantial level for a number one team. I think they proved against Ohio State that they can play with the best of them, and they're continuing to show that their tempo style is really tough for a lot of teams to handle, especially if they're playing in the Autzen Zoo. But let's wrap this up and go check out the rankings, you guys. And I will be back before we do before we do the games for the week, because they will be unveiling the first rankings with the 12-team playoff. And Louisville jumps back into the top 25 at 6-3. Vanderbilt jumps back in at 6-3. Pittsburgh drops 5 after their first loss to number 23. Kansas State drops 5 to go to 7-2. No way. Pittsburgh should be higher than Kansas State. Colorado goes up 2. No. Colorado couldn't beat Pittsburgh if they begged themselves to it. Washington State goes up 2 to number 20. Clemson drops 8 to 6-2. I don't like that one. Should have dropped further. Army 8-0 goes up 3. Iowa State goes to 17. No, Army should be 17. Iowa State drops 6 to number 17. Ole Miss goes up 3. No way. No way. A&M drops 5 to 7-2. Drops down to 15. Nope, they should drop further. LSU goes up 2. Didn't even play this week. They should have stayed put. They shouldn't have moved. SMU flies up the board to number 7. I agree with that. Boise State goes up 3 to number 12. Alabama goes up 3. No, they should have stayed put. Notre Dame drops 2. See, that's what I don't like. Alabama goes up 2. Goes up 3. No, they should have stayed put. Notre Dame definitely shouldn't have dropped. They should have stayed at least in number 9. And BYU stays put? Nah. Indiana goes to 9-0. Moves up 5. Absolutely. Tennessee stays even? No. Indiana should have gone up an extra one. Penn State should have dropped 1. And I would agree that Indiana should be in the top 6. Now, there ain't no way Tennessee stays put after struggling. No, not at home. Penn State drops 3. No, they should have dropped further. Texas moves up 1. Miami moves up 1. That's fair. Ohio State moves up 1 to number 3. Georgia stays put at 7-1. I think Georgia should have came down 1. And then Oregon is the unanimous number 1. But guys, that's going to wrap it up for us. Brad, thank you so much for doing your thing. And all you other guys out there that are watching, please comment. Jump in the conversation. That's what this is about. If you guys have an issue with what the top 25 is, let us know. If you think I shouldn't have issue with the top 25, let me know. If there's some comments that I made about your team or games, please let me know. Don't forget, comment down below, and when you subscribe and become a member of the Gridiron Gab Triple Option family, put your name down in the comments. Also, go to the Facebook page at Gridiron Gab Triple Option. Let us know what you think. What other segments would you like for us to add to the show? Also, check me out on Instagram at Mr. CeeLo and find out what types of things I'm involved in and what other things I'm working on. But until the next time, same Gab channel, same Gab platform.